Hi, it's Dan here, and in this video I'm going to show you how to resolve those artwork issues that have been bugging you with your podcast. So in other words, how to set your systems up so that when somebody downloads an episode of your podcast to their portable device, they can see your artwork. After all, you've gone to all this effort to create this artwork and nobody is seeing it. Okay, so let's start off at the point. Let's just say we've just finished recording our podcast. And the mp3 file is on our desktop and we saved it as test. So that's just what it's called. So what we need to now do is just open our version of iTunes. Now this is my version of iTunes here, Noel Gallagher's latest album. Very good album, by the way, if you're looking for something nice and fairly mellow. So here we are in iTunes. Now what we need to do is to create a new playlist. See, I keep all my episodes, podcast episodes, in a playlist. That's just a system that I've created that works really, really well for me. So these are the playlists here. Now to do this, you scroll down and you hit the plus button. And that basically brings up, let's just call it podcast sample. Okay, so podcast sample is now my playlist. Nothing's in the playlist. So this is where we go back to the desktop. We grab our podcast episode and pull it back in. Now, it doesn't look that great, does it? I mean, it hasn't got a whole lot of personality. The name is Test 1. Couldn't be much more boring if we tried. There's no artist and there's no album. So there's no information here for this mp3 file, or just the absolute bare minimum. So the whole process of ID3 tagging is attaching information to this mp3 file. So that down the track, if somebody has downloaded this file to their portable device and they pull it up on their iPhone, it's got a name, it's got a time, it's got an artist, it's got an album, and it's got some artwork. If you're like me, if you've ever spent much time around iPods or other portable devices, how frustrating is it when you're going through and you see an untitled, and then it's just got a length, so no artist, no name. That's really annoying, isn't it? You know what that is? That is an mp3 file that has not been tagged. Okay? So that's why I'm teaching this process, because that gets rid of untitled files and it also fixes up your artwork problem. But I'm going to explain how that works in a couple of minutes. Firstly, let's actually attach some information to this file. Right. So we right-click, Get Info. You've got all these tabs up here. I'm interested in the info tab to begin with. So this is where we punch in all our information. Okay, all our information has magically been entered in. So we have the name here, so the episode number, episode 1, and interview with Pat Flynn. That's the name of that episode. Artist is obviously my name. I put the year in. Album artist, podcast like a radio DJ podcast, and I put that in the album section as well. Track number, I normally put the episode number in the track number window there. And comments, you can always leave a telephone number or a contact email that people can get in touch with you on. In my case, I like to put my website. Okay, so that's the basic text information that we're attaching to this file now. This is the most important part as far as I'm concerned once we have all that info locked to the file. The artwork. Okay, so we click on the artwork tab. Now this is pretty sort of unassuming, isn't it? But we go down to add and we find our podcast artwork, which if, there we go, fantastic. So I want to open that up and bang, what I've done then is I've attached this artwork to this mp3 file or this episode. Now you may be sitting there saying, well, I don't have a problem with artwork because when I look up my podcast in iTunes, the artwork is there on my little podcast page. It all looks fine. Let me say this, and this is a mistake that so many people make. That's only half of the bigger picture. The rest of the picture is this, because of course iTunes have your artwork because it's in your feed. So you told that to your host. You said, this is where my artwork is. Please include it in my RSS feed. And so that's why it does appear in your iTunes podcast page. But The problem is when people subscribe to your podcast and they download episodes, they don't download your RSS feed. They download from your RSS feed. And so what that means is they just get the file. They don't get the artwork. So this is why we need to be really meticulous about attaching our artwork to our mp3 files each time we create a new episode of our podcast, and tagging it with that information which I've just shown you. Otherwise, your podcast is going to end up in someone's portable device as one of those ugly, untitled things that are just awful. Okay, so let's click OK, and there we go. Bang, all that information has been updated. So we've just tagged an mp3. And by the way, something that will help you remember this process of tagging an mp3, and somebody once told me this, it's fantastic, I want to share it with you. Look at a t-shirt or a sweater. When you go into a shop, where do you get the information? Where was it made? How much is it? Is it on sale? You look at the tag, don't you? Well, that's exactly what we've done here. We've tagged an mp3. We know the name of it, we know the artist of it, and we know where it's come from. So that's how easy it is to tag an mp3 file for our podcast. It's a really good habit to get into, and just being consistent with our branding across the board, particularly when it comes to artwork. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch. I really appreciate it. I look forward to catching up with you again sometime soon. All the best and take care.